Hello and good morning from Leverkusen, Germany. I've got some great news to share with you. The Covestro results for 2021 are in. But before we start with our annual press conference, let's take a look at the results of our social media polls from the past weeks. We recently asked you about the connection between climate neutrality and circular economy. Looking at your votes, there is a clear result. The majority of you thinks that climate neutrality and circular economy are complementary goals. In other words, no climate neutrality, no circular economy, and no circular economy, no climate neutrality. In another poll, you were asked how our new strategy, Sustainable Future, and the reorganization of our group structure affects our goals. Again, the results were clear. Most of you believe that becoming fully circular is the goal that's most affected. Well, let's see how our CEO Markus Steilemann and CFO Toepfer put these results into context at our annual press conference, which is about to start any second. Stay tuned.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give you a warm welcome to our annual press conference for Covestro AG. We're delighted to be able to welcome you to our virtual studio live from Leverkusen today. Now, before I hand over to our CEO Markus Steilemann and our CFO Thomas Toepfer, I'd like to just give you a few housekeeping comments. So before we begin, we would just like to turn your attention to our rules on photos and recordings. Please bear in mind that the entire annual press conference, including the Q&A which will take place after the speeches, will be recorded. And we'd be delighted to be able to see you for the Q&A session, so if you have a question, please also switch on your camera. Please also bear in mind that all of the statements made are forward-looking statements, and that they are based on current assumptions and forecasts of Covestro AG. And now I would like to introduce today's hosts. Shortly, you will receive a warm welcome from our CEO Markus Steilemann and our CFO Dr. Thomas Toepfer. Both of them will give you an overview for the financial year 2021 and also an outlook for the current financial year. And they will also put into context our climate targets that were published today. After their speeches, the gentlemen will be available to answer the questions of you, our selected journalists. And now I will hand over to you, Markus.
Welcome. Before we begin, let me say a few remarks about the current situation in Europe. I personally am shocked by these developments, and I am also very saddened by them. Here at Covestro, we condemn the use of force and violence of any kinds, and our thoughts are with those affected. And therefore, we and I are very aware that currently there are more important issues on your minds than the financial press conference of Covestro. But nevertheless, I'd like to say that I'm very pleased, therefore, that you're here to participate in our press conference today. So, with no further ado, let's begin. 2021 was a year in which Covestro once again surpassed itself, and we've had a successful 2021. We set the course in many areas. We ideally positioned the company for growth, and we presented our new strategy. Within that new strategy, we've already achieved some very important strategic milestones. Now, we're even closer to our customers. We're even more efficient, and we're more competitive. That means that this last fiscal year fits right into our corporate mission of making the world a brighter place, of becoming fully circular, and our strategy of a sustainable and economically successful future for Covestro. Thomas Toepfer and I will be explaining all of this to you in our remarks to come. But first of all, allow me to set the stage. The global challenges are still there. Climate change, pollution, limited resources, and social inequality. In addition to climate neutrality, this is the target, or the target is a circular economy, and that's crucial and decisive for mastering our challenges. Now, how are we going to master these challenges? Well, it's because we want to make Covestro part of the solution, and we want to become fully circular. The clear roadmap for implementation of this is offered by our new strategy called Sustainable Future. Now, how are we going to proceed along these lines? Well, we already provided an answer to this in 2021 by introducing to you our new strategy in 3 different chapters. First of all, Chapter 1, ideal positioning in our market environment. Then the second chapter, sustainable growth by combining profitability and sustainability. And last but not least, becoming fully circular. All of this is based on a strong foundation. First of all, moving forward with digitization and our unique We Are One culture. And as a result, we can say that in addition to responding to changes in the current world, we're also addressing the digital transition and our competitive situation in highly competitive markets and customer industries. And we believe that the increasing demand for our products is a core element of our strategy. Last year, our focus was on Chapter 1, and in particular, we focused on the new culture, and we've already achieved quite a bit there. The first important milestone was the realignment of our organization as a basis for ideally leveraging our potential, and in addition to that, to making our potential even clearer. We previously had 3 segments, now we have 7 business units, and that means we're much more clearly oriented toward the different needs of our customers and markets, and we want to therefore be the best partner for our customers. And we grouped these activities into 2 segments. First of all, the Performance Materials segment, and then secondly, the Solutions and Specialties segment. The advantages are quite obvious. Quick and flexible reactions, becoming really close to customers, and high levels of efficiency, and as a result, we're much more focused and much more competitive. This structure fosters value creation, and this has already been confirmed by our strong fiscal 2021. Because in fiscal 2021, we, in fact, increased our earnings guidelines several times, and we achieved that guideline. The year was characterized in particular by a high level of global demand because we were sold out over long periods of time. Our core volume growth was 10%. This includes our newly acquired RFM business. Revenue was at a record level of 15.9 billion euros, the best year in the history of the company, which was also based on a high sales price level. Our EBITDA more than doubled to 3.1 billion euros, and these results show that our strategy is truly coming to bear. Becoming fully circular as our global guiding principle is the right way, and it is a successful way for Covestro. I'd like to take this opportunity now to make very clear to you that all of this is only possible thanks to our employees. Now, before I give you a report on the next few steps in the implementation of our strategy, we'll hear an in-depth insight into our strong results for 2021 and the forecast for 2022, and this will be done by my colleague Thomas Toepfer. I'll be back to talk to you in a minute. Thomas, over to you.
Thank you very much, Markus. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our annual press conference from me as well. Now, we are looking back indeed on a very successful financial year 2021. And I would now like to take you through the individual figures. In the year 2021, we had a global rebound in demand. And this resulted in a significant volume growth in all regions. As you can see, up 10% year on year. And the acquired business Resins and Functional Materials from DSM made a contribution totaling 6 percentage points. We registered particularly strong growth in Germany at 19.5%, but in China too, we recorded a strong growth with a 14.3% increase in sales volumes. Now, it was first and foremost the available production capacity in Europe and the USA which restricted our growth. Now, I would like to remind you on the Storm Uri, which took place at the start of the year 2021 in the United States. Now, if you have a look at the industries that we supply, then the strongest growth drivers were the electronics industry and the automotive sector, with volume growth of 9% and 10% respectively globally. Now, this led to an overall sales increase to 15.9 billion euros. Now, EBITDA was more than doubled on a year-on-year basis at 3.1 billion euros, and this was powered primarily by a very high positive price delta. Now, the segment Performance Materials made the largest contribution to this development. However, a rise in sales volumes at 350 million euros had a positive impact too. There were 3 negative impacts on EBITDA, which you can find in the other items. We had a one-off effect of around 60 million euros in connection with the RFM acquisition, and we also had a one-off effect amounting to almost 40 million euros during the course of our transformation program. But the largest item here is provisions for bonus payments to our employees. As Markus Steilemann said, without these employees, such a successful 2021 would simply not have been possible. And as such, bonuses came in at a total of 443 million euros, which was very well deserved. On the next slide, I would like to take a look at the Performance Materials segment. In the financial year 2021, we registered a very strong, high positive price delta. So Performance Materials was able to more than offset the rise in commodity and energy prices and pass them on to our customers. And this is primarily attributable to highly robust demand from important customer industries. Now, simultaneously, however, growth potential was constrained by the persistent limits in product availability. So what's our outlook for this segment for the year 2022? As you can see on the right-hand side, we anticipate continued strong sales growth due to improved product availability. However, we also expect in more intense competition, particularly when it comes to polycarbonates, which means that we forecast a decline in EBITDA during the course of the year. Now, on a more positive note, we expect supply and demand for MDI and TDI to balance out more evenly. I would now like to turn your attention to the segment Solutions and Specialties. Now, despite inflation, we were able to defend our EBITDA figure and actually increase it a little bit. We registered a strong growth powered primarily by the RFM acquisition. Now, this integration is well on track and is actually going much quicker than we anticipated. Furthermore, despite the rise in commodity prices, we were able to register a slight increase in EBITDA. Now, this is one of the characteristics of the specialities business because due to longer-term contracts, solutions and specialties were not able to fully pass on price increases to customers. So what's the outlook for this segment for 2022? We expect continued strong sales growth, and we also expect a significant increase in EBITDA on a year-on-year basis. Now, the largest factor behind this will be volumes. Here we expect strong growth, but we also, in S&S, anticipate a positive price delta. The acquired RFM business will again register a significant contribution in 2022, which will be higher than it is in 2021 because it will be recorded for the entire 12 months of the year. Now, these developments show the continued improvement of the margin in this segment towards our target of 17% by the year 2024. So, in summary, the strong performance in both of these segments serves as evidence that Covestro, with its new structure, has laid the foundations for sustainable growth for the future. I would now like to turn your attention to capital expenditure. Our priority is to continue to invest in profitable organic growth. In 2021, we registered capex of around 764 million euros, 350 to 400 million euros of which were for investment in service, maintenance and security. Now, as you can see on the graph, for 2022, we anticipate around 1 billion euros in investment, which is the highest value in the history of the Covestro. And investments in maintenance and service will remain stable at 400 million euros, which means that the largest increase will be in investment in growth, which will total 600 million euros. Now, there are two other items which you'll be familiar with which are included here, one of which is the expansion of our chlorine production in Tarragona in Spain, with an investment volume of around 200 million euros for the period 2018 to 2022. And we also have our largest financial investment project, which is in Antwerp, which is the expansion of our aniline production with an investment volume of around 400 million euros for the period 2020 to 2024. Now onto the dividend. Of course, we would like our shareholders and investors to be rewarded adequately for the success of our company. And we're delighted that we can propose to the AGM on the 21st of April a dividend of €3.40 per share, which is the highest dividend in our company's history. So overall, we would like to pay out a total of €657 million to our shareholders. This corresponds to a payout ratio of 41%. And as you will remember, in the year 2020, we revised our dividend policy. This means that now we have a payout ratio of between 35 to 55% of consolidated earnings. The objective here is to ensure that the dividend is more closely linked to the economic situation of our company. Now, if you look at the previous year, you can see that this policy has its advantages because in years when we've had lower earnings, the dividend has remained at the upper end of the target corridor. So it does remain attractive, and in strong years, the dividend is supported or boosted by high earnings. I would now like to take a look at our key customer industries. In the year 2021, we profited from a resurgence in global demand, and we expect this recovery to continue in this year too. We expect, in particular in the construction and automotive sectors, a strong recovery because these sectors suffered a sharp contraction during the coronavirus pandemic. Now, in the automotive sector in particular, we believe there's great potential because our products are used for the products in electrical cars and also for charging stations. But in the construction industry too, we anticipate very robust growth of 3.6%. Now, the global furniture and electronics industries will continue to operate at an attractive level. So as you can see, in our overall development, Covestro and its product has come up with the correct response to the consistently increasing demand for sustainable solutions. So overall, for the year 2022, we expect EBITDA to be above the mid-cycle level again. As you can see on the graph, the so-called mark-to-market estimate of 3.3 billion euros is based on the data from January and is above the upper end of our EBITDA forecast for the year 2022. And this forecast is a 2.5 to 3 billion euros, and it reflects mounting competitive pressure during the course of 2022, because this is what we anticipate. Now, the mid-cycle EBITDA is now 2.5 billion euros, and the increase as of 2022 is attributable to the RFM acquisition, which means that it will be higher than in 2021. But the important thing is that by 2024, we expect an increase in the mid-cycle EBITDA to 2.8 billion euros, powered by growth and further RFM synergies, which we expect to realize. Ladies and gentlemen, at the start of the financial year 2022, Covestro has expanded its control systems. In future, we will have an even stronger focus on profitability and sustainability. This means that the KPI will become EBITDA as opposed to volume growth in our core business. Furthermore, the reduction of our Scope 1 and 2 emissions will become a key indicator for us. This means that our measures for reducing greenhouse gas emissions will be given a greater focus, and it also means that the progress we make will be more transparent and verifiable. This shows that everything that we do will be connected with sustainability. Let's have a look at some of the figures. For greenhouse gas emissions, we expect a slight increase to 5.6 to 6.1 million tonnes of CO2 equivalents this year in 2022. Now, the reason for this is a less favourable composition of the power that we source externally and also increased production volumes. Now, from a commercial perspective, we believe that in 2022 we'll continue our strong performance. This means we forecast EBITDA for financial year 2022 of between 2.5 and 3 billion euros. Now, of course, there is a high level of uncertainty given the macroeconomic environment and the geopolitical situation. We also expect a contraction in the margins for our standard products. However, we do believe that there are positive counter effects. For example, possible resurgence effects in the automotive sector and a margin and earnings increase in the solutions and specialties segments. We expect free operating cash flow to come in between 1.0 and 1.5 billion euros, and our return on capital employed above our WACC of 5 to 9 percentage points. So in summary, we have started the current financial year with tailwinds. This is reflected in our forecast for the first quarter of 2022. We forecast EBITDA of between 750 million and 850 million euros, which is significantly above the prior year level. Moreover, yesterday we announced a new share buyback program with a volume of 500 million euros over a period of 2 years. We see this buyback as an additional opportunity to generate value for our shareholders because it allows the capital structure of the company to be optimized. It will thus increase profit and dividend per share, and the shares that are bought back will be incorporated to the reduction of our share capital. Now, with this decision, we are setting clear priorities for the use of our cash. Now, profitable growth through investment is our main priority. We want to offer an attractive dividend payout for our shareholders. However, at the moment, large acquisitions are of a lower priority. We have our main focus is on generating value for our shareholders, which we believe that buying our own shares at the current point in time is a very good option for our company. What remains important, however, is to defend our solid investment grade rating. And I would now like to hand back over to Markus Steilemann.
Thank you, Thomas. Outstanding numbers in a challenging and fiercely contested competitive environment. I believe that with this new strategy, we are indeed on the right track. As we said, the circular economy is a global target principle, and it remains the key to economizing resources, protecting the environment, and achieving climate neutrality. Sustainable ways of living and achieving the targets of the Paris Climate Agreement, though, can't be done alone. And that's why the chemical industry is particularly important in this regard. As an esteemed colleague from the industry said, that the chemical industry is the mother of all industries because it has an impact on the climate impact of many other sectors. And just to convey this idea to you, I can tell you that 95% of products in German industry are based on products from the chemical industry. And therefore, back in 2005, Covestro already mentioned its target was to have specific greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. And I can tell you that I'm very proud that this target was already achieved in 2021 because we surpassed it then by reducing by 54%. So it's a fact that since 2005, Covestro has grown with climate neutrality, and we're proud that we achieved this target 4 years prior to the original target date. But this isn't enough for us. We are continuing to bear responsibility, we are maintaining our pace-setter role, and we are establishing even more ambitious climate targets. Covestro is going to become climate neutral. After nearly 2 years of detailed planning, I can now tell you about further details regarding the roadmap and implementation of it. We are deliberately establishing a very ambitious target. By 2035, we intend to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from our own production, that's called Scope 1, and external energy supply, called Scope 2, to net zero. The first big intermediate step will be a total reduction of emissions by 2030 by 60% to 2.2 million tons per year in 2030. This means, all in all, in less than 13 years, by 2035, we are planning to become climate neutral. We're concentrating here on different focal points to achieve real and absolute reductions in CO2 emissions. And only in areas where it's not possible to achieve technologically will we be looking for and implementing compensation measures for unavoidable remaining emissions. So how are we going to proceed here? Well, what's crucial in this debate and in our process and procedure is to orient what we do towards facts and to have a clear roadmap. First of all, as Thomas Toepfer has already mentioned in a different context, we're going to see an increase in emissions by a total of about 1 million tons as a result of growth, pure growth. At the same time, in Germany, we're expecting different external effects will have positive and negative influences on our carbon footprint. For instance, ending the use of coal-fired power generation and also the elimination of the Renewable Energy Act surcharge and the nuclear energy phase-out, if you add all that up, this means that it would mean a decrease of our Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 0.7 million tons a year. So carbon dioxide emissions will go up unless we did something. So on our path toward net zero, we have 3 concrete action fields at Covestro that we're planning to focus on. First of all, more sustainable production processes. Secondly, renewable power, renewable electricity. And this, for us, is the biggest lever for achieving our net zero target. And last but not least, green steam or renewable steam. Now, all in all, I can say that from today's point of view, we'll be able to achieve this transformation at relatively low cost. The current status is that by 2030, we will be investing some 250 to 600 million euros. What this is about is making production of energy more efficient and, as a result, cutting operating costs by up to 100 million euros per year. And on the other hand, though, we expect that there will be counteractive annual increases of operating costs in a low 9-digit figure range, low hundreds of millions. And this is based on the assumption that alternative energies perhaps might be more expensive than continuing to use fossil energies. But as a result of the current situation and other reasons too, there is going to be a continued debate on this. Now, what do our individual measures here look like? Well, the first field of action is expanding the sustainable production as a basis for our path toward climate neutrality. And for this, we're going to be implementing site-specific global measures for energy efficiency in order to improve this everywhere around the world. Important cornerstones are the reduction of nitrous oxide emissions by means of catalysts. We're already doing this today successfully at our sites in Caojing in China and Baytown in the United States. 2 examples from production in Germany. Well, the especially high energy efficient production of isocyanates in the course of what we call hot phosgene generation. That all sounds quite technical, but this means that in the production facilities we're using less energy. And at the same time, in Brunsbüttel in Germany, we have a pilot plant at a large scale with additive technology that is already operating. And this additive technology leads to a significant reduction in the amount of energy required. And as a result, we're going to continue along this path. We're moving more toward using alternatives to fossil-based gas. What's crucial here, too, is that in addition to the technological possibilities, in our plant construction and catalyst development, we're also looking at digitization, and we're going to continue to focus and move forward here with digitization. What's it about here? Well, we can control and manage our production much more effectively now. At the same time, process optimization can be achieved by simulation before we set up a new facility, and this means that all in all, our plants will become much more energy efficient. And the second action field is renewable electricity. We began actually 3 years ago. That is, in setting up a portfolio with our newly structured power purchase agreements. And in the future, there will be a major expansion of this and much more individual or customized solutions to our specific sites for renewable energies in the context of the natural situation at our different plants, which means that step by step, we're going to be transitioning to renewable energies. Let me mention just a couple of pioneering examples here. For instance, we have concluded a contract with Ørsted, and this ensures that starting in 2025, we will cover 10% of the energy we're going to be consuming at our sites in Germany from offshore wind parks. Secondly, our plant in Antwerp. We've got a contract that we concluded with Engie, and today, that is as of April last year, it already covers 45% of the energy required at that site. In Shanghai, we're already covering 10% of the energy required there by means of solar power. All of these were major steps in the right direction, and we're going to continue to move systematically along this path until we have transitioned all of our sites. And the third action field is providing renewable steam. Steam and renewable steam, that's important for chemical production, and therefore changing over from fossil to renewable here for steam is an essential step. The advantage is that our production facilities can continue operating with no changes. Now, what are our technology options look like here in this context that we're exploring? Well, first of all, using biogas, that is gas that is not from natural gas or from oil fields. Secondly, electrification of steam generation with renewable power. You're familiar with this at a smaller level if you have a water boiler or a water boiler at home. And then the use of green hydrogen based on ammonia as a fuel, and the use of synthetic renewable natural gas on the CO2 basis. And for green hydrogen, as I mentioned, we are talking about using ammonia as a fuel. And the target remains to achieve sustainable progress on our path toward climate neutrality. All of this, from today's point of view, will help us to ensure that by 2035, we can become climate neutral for Scope 1 and Scope 2. But Covestro is not going to stop here either, because what we want is to remain a pace setter on the path toward a climate neutral future. And for this reason, we are focusing on the circularity of our products so that we can accelerate the reduction of CO2 emissions across the entire value chain. We already have achieved some important milestones this by today. As you know, for a long time, we've been addressing the demand for our products and sustainable solutions by our customers and by retail customers. And now we're offering all of our these products in a climate neutral version. Climate neutral MDI, for instance, for insulation of buildings, and polycarbonate, as Thomas Toepfer mentioned, in electric mobility, in cars that are already being used. And over the long term, all of our products we hope to be able to provide in a climate neutral version. And this means we're supplying to attractive growth markets, and we're helping our customers even more in reducing their CO2 footprint or carbon footprint. All of this will allow us to reduce CO2 or carbon emissions beyond our own sphere of activity. And the next big step, therefore, will be to reduce emissions across the entire value chain. So that means we're talking here about Scope 3. And for this purpose, we're already working today full steam ahead on a plan for achieving or for then publishing a plan for reducing Scope 3 emissions, and we hope to publish this in 2023. So allow me now to briefly summarize. We've seen a strong year with very good results. This year, we see it being characterized in particular by a high level of demand. We see that there has been in fiscal 21 a dynamic development of revenue and results. And fiscal 21 has shown that we're ideally positioned with our new structure. We're even more customer-oriented, more efficient, and more competitive. And we intend to be part of a circular and climate-neutral future. All of this is clearly expressed in our clear vision and our ambitious target of achieving climate neutrality by 2035. We at Covestro are therefore laying the foundation for sustainable and profitable growth and our long-term economic success. And therefore, I'm optimistic for fiscal 22 as a whole, and here too, we expect another high result level. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for your interest and for your attention. In about 2 minutes, Thomas Toepfer and I will be back in order to answer any questions you may have. See you in a minute.
Welcome back. We hope that you were able to use the break in a sustainable and CO2 neutral manner. Now, as announced, we will be having the Q&A session for the journalists who have joined us. All of this will be broadcast, so stay tuned, as we like to say. And now, depending on the question, either Mr. Toepfer or Mr. Steilemann will respond. I will receive the question on my tablet, and we will go through the questions one by one. And we look forward to answering these questions for you. If you would like to ask a question, we'd be very happy if we were able to see you as well. So if you wouldn't mind switching on your video when you ask your question, that would be excellent. So I can see that the first questions have now reached us. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Ms. Höning from the Rheinischen Post. Thank you very much. I have questions about the Ukraine crisis. Could you tell us how many employees you have in Ukraine at the moment. Could you tell us what exactly it is that you do there? Will you be impacted by the sanctions that have been agreed? And another question about the potential for job cuts. Do you have any up-to-date figures on this matter? Good morning, Ms. Henning. It's very nice to see you. And perhaps you could allow me to make a few general remarks. Now, to begin with, and I think I made this very clear at the outset, I am very, very touched, very sad about what is going on in the Ukraine at the moment, what we've heard today, what we've heard in recent days as well. And for this reason, it is very difficult for us to be sitting here today and speaking about Covestro. Nonetheless, I would like to answer the questions that you asked, us. In the Ukraine, we don't have any of our own employees. Our business is at a very, very small level. It accounts for less than 1% of our entire Covestro revenues. Here we have less than 10 million euros in turnover. If you look at Russia and Belarus, then even then we have less than 1% of our business here in terms of revenues. And overall, we maybe have sales with the 8 figures. Now, we're in discussions at the moment, and we support all of the sanctions that have been imposed, and we will be affected by the sanctions when they're imposed. I'd like to reiterate, however, that we do support these sanctions wholeheartedly. I would now like to hand over to Thomas Toepfer in case there's anything he would like to add. As Markus Steilemann said, I think the first point is that the direct or indirect impact on our business is going to be limited. Revenues is less than 1%. So I think the follow-up question will be, what exactly does this mean for things such as energy costs, etc.? Now, as we've seen, the markets, particularly at the end of last week, were experiencing major turbulence. They seem to have calmed somewhat. Nonetheless, we do believe that we will be confronted with an increase in energy costs during 2022. Now, last year, our energy costs rose from $500 million to around 1 billion, and it could increase to 1.5 billion during the course of the current situation. But last year, we also observed that we still managed to double our earnings, which means we continue to anticipate that the rise in input costs will largely or completely be passed on to our customers. And with this in mind, we don't believe that in a larger context we will experience too negative an impact from the current situation. Maybe there's one other thing I would just like to add about the question about job cuts. Now, various opportunities we've commented on this, and we've always said that there's always a theoretical maximum that we speak of. And in this context, we don't have any up-to-date figures. We'll just stick with the comments that there will be very, very small, if job cuts will be very, very small, and only after the end of the implementation will we have specific figures available. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Hoerning. I see we have another question. Ms. Berger from the Kölner Stadtanzeiger. Could you ask us your question, please? I'm sorry, the questions I asked have been answered already, so you don't need to press ahead with those. Okay, then that was a very effective round of answers. Mr. Frontoff from Handelsblatt, then, please. Good morning, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Excellent. Just about the Ukraine and Russia to begin with. Russia specifically. Now, German employees will be brought out of Russia. This was what we've heard from the UK. What's the mood like amongst your employees in Russia when it comes to current developments? Mr. Hontov, good morning from me. Again, I'd like to say that we have 11 employees in Russia, 1 in Belarus. None of these employees have German citizenship. As a result, we do not expect that we will have to relocate them and bring them to Germany. Where the acute situation of the employees is concerned, our dépendance which deal with our employees here in Russia and Belarus, to look after these customers, look after these employees. They are in regular contact with them. We don't have any information at the moment which would suggest that the employees are in a bad situation. We're staying in contact with them. We're monitoring the situation. We've nothing else to report. Does that answer your question, Mr. Endorf? Mr. Frundorf, we can't hear you at the moment. No, sorry. No, sorry, I think. Just one follow-up question. To what extent do you fear an impact of this crisis with its energy policy implications and consequences over the next few years for the sustainable, for making German industry more sustainable as a whole, and also for Covestro? Do you believe that it could set you back on your path to a more sustainable business? Well, it's very difficult to say because we're looking at it in such a big context. At the moment, we have a clear roadmap towards climate neutrality, and the German sites will play a significant impact in this. We have a very clear positioning. We know where we are heading. We'll continue to press ahead with this policy. I've heard from the German government, I think it was yesterday, in fact, that they said that they want to set even more ambitious goals now for a full shift to renewable energy and also electrification. Now, this is exactly what we're looking for too, because this is our plan anyway. Germany and also throughout the world to operate on a climate neutral basis for Scope 1 and Scope 2, and here electrification and the supply of renewable energies is an essential component, as we outlined. What's particularly important is here at Covestro, we don't just look at the energy supply, but also at our supply of commodities, so that over the medium and the long term we can move away from crude oil and natural gas and move towards renewable resources, so that we can produce our products with these. So as dramatic as the situation is, maybe it is a wake-up call for anybody who had any doubt on how important it is to move away from fossil fuels. And one thing which is equally as important is to move towards green energy. I think one of the current members of the cabinet, I think it was the finance minister, said that renewable energy means freedom. And I think that this statement says it all.
Thank you. We are happy to have some international guests with us today, and we're looking forward to a question from Anna Noel, Chemical ESG. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I've got three, please. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Yes, good. Okay, sorry. Just something you just mentioned on Scope 3. I think you said that you're going to announce a plan maybe next year. Could you talk about what the biggest challenges are around that as you form your ideas and what you can do about that? And on the second question is, it's great you're making all this effort on sustainability, but what happens if, in the case of polyurethanes, if the Huntsmans, the Dows, they don't go at the same pace as you? How do you get compensated for what you're doing in terms of price on these big world markets? And the same with polycarbonates. If SABIC goes a bit slower, but you're making the effort to be more sustainable, I'm just wondering how that plays out, I guess. And I can leave it there. Thank you.
Yes, in order to make this best for everyone, I'll answer in German so we don't have any confusion. First of all, thank you for those two questions. The one thing, I'll begin with your second question. It's important in this context to look at the fact that customers see there is added value if they have an opportunity to buy products that are partially or completely circular. And this is our direct customers, and in particular also retail customers. They're all crucial factors. So that means we're moving into markets that have growth potential. We're moving into markets in which products will become established that have an intrinsic added value for our customers and for retail customers. And as a result, we're moving away to a certain extent from conventional supply-demand driven situations and just market-driven mechanisms. And I believe this is a key aspect. We're going to be moving away from a time in which the use of oil and gas for nearly 100 years have been established in the industry. And therefore, our process, our procedure is to be first in the market, to be very clear, to become the most sustainable player in this overall context. That's how we want to position the company. And at the same time, we want to ensure that certain highly competitive areas can be covered by offering these new products. That is, we want to actually have less exposure to that type of product, and that means Covestro's overall vision and ambition play a key role here. And then getting back to your first question, let me briefly ask you what scope 3, the biggest challenges. Well, the biggest challenges here are, in particular, creating the necessary raw materials markets. It's important here to have things be set up. In other words, having or finding access to raw materials, which are drop-in solutions, that is, can be used in existing facilities and plants, and then setting these things up step by step. Even if we wanted to make faster progress than we're already doing in creating non-oil-based products, we couldn't even do it because there's not even enough supply of the necessary products. And this shows how much demand there is on the one hand, but it also shows that customers also are looking for these very products. And this means that we are already moving into growth segments for existing applications and existing markets. And that's how we want to position ourselves as pace setters. So we are therefore convinced and persuaded that this combination of profitability and sustainability must go hand in hand. And there's basically almost no alternative to it. Thank you for those remarks. We're looking forward to a question from Benedikt Müller-Arnold from Süddeutsche Zeitung. Mr. Müller-Arnold, go ahead. Yes, thank you. I have a question about the energy cost situation. Mr. Toepfer mentioned this. He said energy cost last year went up substantially, and he said that for this year, you're expecting another increase. And he also expressed the hope that most of this, or all of it, could be passed on to customers. Is this overall area the main reason why, in your guidance for this year, you are forecasting a slightly lower level than for last year, or are there other effects? Thank you. Well, it's indeed one of the areas that we have taken into account, and this means that we still see a very high level of profitability, but to be precise, it might be slightly below 2021. The second point is, and I intimated this in my presentation, we also believe there are additional capacities in the market for polycarbonates, in particular in Asia, not for the differentiating products, which are our biggest share, but for the commoditized part. But that is a certain part, a certain share, and supply and demand do play the crucial role here in determining what the margin will be at the end of the day. And in my opinion, that's the second big effect that will play a role here. So it's a mixture of these two things. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Müller-Arnold. Now I'd like to hand on to Mr. Preiser from Kunststoff Information. Hi, I'm still fighting with my camera here. I think I have it now. Okay, first of all, I think Mr. Steilemann's colorful socks are a great political statement. I noticed them. Secondly, I wanted to say something about chemical recycling, or ask something about chemical recycling. I didn't really hear it so far. To what extent can you say that the prospects for the future well, look good. There are a number of plants, but they're just being tested right now. And when do you expect that they will be working at an industrial scope so that you can apply chemical recycling, achieve chemical recycling? And what are the energy costs look like? Are they perhaps prohibitive for those processes? Thank you. Well, that's a relatively complex question that we're looking at intensively. First of all, we've got to state and note that this can only be done in a network based on the spirit of partnership, as is the case today. The petrochemicals industry and the chemical industry in many areas are closely networked with customers and beyond. There's almost no player that goes from the drill well all the way on through to the retail customer and supplies all of those people and companies. And that's why for the circular economy in the future, it's important to remember that it won't be one player covering the whole circle, so to speak. There will be many players depending on what circle you're talking about, and there are some overlapping circles too. Well, it will depend on who can make a contribution to the circular economy there. What we're doing specifically for the products that we sell is that we develop processes which, as you say, are advanced recycling processes, because these materials should not be put into mechanical recycling. So if we're talking about materials recycling not being possible, we have to move on to chemical recycling, because despite all our efforts, it won't be possible to produce all products so that they can only have the materials recycled. So we're not talking about replacing a well-established recycling technology that should be broadened and expanded, but we're adding something to that so that the entire economy can become circular. In this context, we've done a lot of research, but we also know that a lot of our current suppliers are already able to offer alternative sources of raw materials and then convert that to products which are certified completely circular in terms of CO2, for example. And here it's important to see that there's a very fast, although it's a small amount, we have a fast-growing amount of raw materials in markets already, though it's small. Let me give you an example. Last year, there were 20,000 tons of alternative raw materials that we bought for Covestro. And this year, we're planning a range of 70 to 100,000 tons. So this is an increase by a factor of 3 to 5. Nevertheless, next year, only about 2.5% of our raw materials base will be covered by this. So that means that more than 97% will be based on crude oil derivatives. I just wanted to explain that. Despite fast growth rates, intensive research going on in the first few years, it'll be moving or remaining at a small level. And we expect that by about the middle of the 20s, this will change in the markets, in materials that are important for us, relevant for us, and that means there will be millions of tons of chemical recycling products that will be available. These will be products that will be supplied by our suppliers. And then with regard to energy costs, well, here it's important to remember something. Even chemical recycling of plastics is more energy intensive than material recycling, but it uses less energy than recycling other things, paper, metal, glass. And you've got to remember this if you look at the overall energy footprint of an economy, because the chemical recycling of chemicals is at the lower range of energy consumption and not in the middle or toward the top of it. And this is an important point, I think. First of all, mechanical recycling whenever possible, and then advanced recycling measures, and then you have the other ones, glass, paper, metal, and that's what you have at the top of the energy-intensive scale. And as you can see here, too, we're basing what we do on facts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Preiser. No, I can't see any further questions. If anybody does have a question, now feel free to ask. This doesn't appear to be the case. And in that case, we're very pleased that we have satisfied your demand for information today. Now, of course, all of our colleagues are available to you after the annual press conference to answer any questions you may have. Contact us at any time. And I'd now like to say thank you to Thomas Toepfer, and Markus Steilemann. I would like to say thank you very much to you for joining us today. Thank you very much for your questions. And I'll hand over to Markus Steilemann. Now, again, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody, and we have a strong year 2021 behind us, and as you've seen with our forecast for 2022, we are very optimistic for the future. Thank you very much for your interest today, and let's stay in contact and together work towards climate neutrality and a circular economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching our annual press conference. In case you missed anything, you can always re-watch this live stream or visit our website for more information. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below and we'll respond as quickly as possible. And I'll see you next time.